Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine. I'm with Defending Rights and Dissent, an organization that works to uphold First Amendment rights. I'm currently an intern with the organization, and I'm really excited to bring this event to you today with Malik Washington, who is a prison abolitionist and formerly incarcerated person that advocates for the rights of folks who are currently incarcerated. So thank you so much for joining us today, Malik. Really quickly, before we go ahead and start, are there any social media handles that you would like for us to, let everyone know about? Any Instagram, website, so on and so forth?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to speak today. The First Amendment is very, very important. And a lot of times prisoners are targeted horribly for just exercising that right. But before we get into that, let me share some of my handles. So you can find me on Facebook at Malik Washington 68, on Instagram at Comrade Malik. But most of all, I highly encourage you to visit the San Francisco BayView National Black Newspaper website, which is www.sfbayview.com. You won't be disappointed. There's some amazing content there.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was wondering if, as we get started, just a general overview. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your story? How did you get to where you are now? And let us know a little bit more about your role in the BayView with that newspaper.
Okay. Well, as you know, my name is Malik Washington. I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the son of a steel worker, and my mom would basically worked as a social worker, and she worked also on real estate. Um, I actually, at first, we come from poverty, but there was some things that happened where we came out of the poverty and we moved to a very affluent neighborhood in Murraysville, Pennsylvania. Um, I kind of shunned the affluency and kind of ran to the street. And I got involved with drugs, selling, using, and then involved in a life of crime. And that led me to the penitentiary. I eventually was sentenced to 20 years of hard time in Texas. And they say, you see on the highway, do you see signs that say, don't mess with Texas? I didn't pay attention. I should have. Texas was horrible. But while I was in Texas, I would say I was politicized way before I got to Texas, but it actually got me a lot more politicized because I seen so many egregious abuses of human and civil rights. I saw so much abuse and pain of human beings. And that is what motivated me to actually started to get more aggressive to advocate for people who didn't really have the intellectual capacity to advocate for themselves. There's a very high illiteracy rate amongst prisoners in Texas. And so the system runs over those people. Sometimes there's language barriers. You have many people that don't speak English is not their main language. They speak Spanish, and the system handles them very roughly. A lot of times trumping up charges, railroading people. There is a huge instance of prosecutorial misconduct in the state criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. So I know that you mentioned, you're formerly incarcerated and you've done this work. I know that you have a role in the Industrial Workers of the World, Incarcerated Workers of the World Organizing Committee. What was your role in it, and how would you describe this organization?
Okay, first of all, I want to clarify that we have the long time labor union, the Industrial Workers of the World, which was founded, I believe, around 1905. Very, very storied and very influential labor union, even to this day. And as an offshoot, there was created the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, or IWOC, the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, or IWOC. And the reason I want to tell, a lot of people don't even know why the IWW would even advocate for a incarcerated workers union. And one of the reasons is because there is a such thing as the exploitation of free prison labor in America. And we hear about these companies that do business with state prisons because they want to get free labor or low labor, or, low paid labor, like 2 cents a day or something like that. Just the exploitation of human beings. Texas happened to be one of the most egregious abusers of the free prison labor continuum. Okay. And so someone reached out to me, an organizer who's with IWalk headquarters in Kansas City. Her name is Brianna. Brianna reached out to me in 2015, and she informed me that Kevin Rashid Johnson, who's the Minister of Defense for the new African Black Panther Party, had signed on as an ally with IWalk. And because I was a member of the new African Black Panther Party, I basically followed Rashid's lead and also signed on as an ally with IWalk. And I actually became very active in the organizing of national prison work strikes, starting in Texas, because I was in Texas. And I can tell you more about that, but that's where it started at. I started in 2015, joining IWalk, and started organizing prison work strikes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So many people might know of the IWW as a radical union, but would be surprised to learn of its role within prison organizing. So let's expand a little more on the connection between labor organizing and organizing within prisons.
People in America, not all people, but the mainstream, and basically judges, okay, prison officials, law enforcement agencies, they do not view prisoners as human beings. We are relegated to a status of subhumans. So basically, we are in fact treated as slaves, prison slaves. Our lives don't mean anything. So working us for free, why not? The thing about IWalk is IWalk and the IWW recognized us as workers and not slaves. They said these human beings are working and they should have some of the same rights that workers have, that free world workers have. So what they said is, hey, let's go ahead and acknowledge their humanity, but let's also recognize their rights as workers. Okay. And one of the main reasons I got really excited about this is because Texas, the state of Texas, has created laws to keep prisoners from being protected by rights that free world workers would usually be treated at. I'll give you an example. There's about 109 prisons in the state of Texas. And almost at all of those prisons, there are prison factories, and they specialize in various things. There's mattress factories, there's computer recovery factories, there's meat packing factories. There's a number of factories and agricultural factories, and they profit off the backs of free labor. However, there's another type of factory. You have a metal fabrication factory, and there's powdered paint and welding, and there's no proper ventilation. So I actually worked in one of these factories in 2009 in Styles Unit in Beaumont. And what I discovered is that OSHA, the Occupational Safety Board Administration, they cannot even go into state of Texas prison facilities in order to see if OSHA standards are being followed. The EPA can't go in there. No regulatory agency of the government can step foot into a state prison in Texas in order to see if the prisoners who are working for free and being treated like slaves and who are not being given any type of advantage or any kind of credit towards their parole. They don't get any work time. They don't get any good time. Okay. They basically are treated like slaves. So the point is, but it's even worse because we have environmental racism and environmental injustices that are forced upon these people. Okay. And I was one of them. So I was able to articulate the nature of the wrong in a clear and concise manner to the masses. But I was also able to communicate with my fellow prisoners and convince them that withdrawing their free labor was an advantage or was something that they should do in order to motivate the capitalist oppressors that run TDCJ, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, to try to give them some of their rights and actually credit them for the work that they do so that they could get out earlier. Okay, but Texas has set up a horrible program of discrimination and abuse in regards to prisoners.
Thank you. So you mentioned, you have all this experience in terms of talking to fellow incarcerated folks. You mentioned, you did some work with IWalk starting in Texas in 2005. Expand a little more on that. What was it like starting these national prison strikes, and how did this go about happening? How did you organize? Just elaborate on that subject.
I can go into detail about how I organize, but I would be remiss if I did not mention Melvin Ray, now known as Bennu Hannibal Ray's son, kinetic justice of the Free Alabama movement. I would be remiss if I did not mention these brothers because they laid the groundwork for the work that I did in prison. But even more so, we have to mention these beautiful men and women in the state of California. 33,000 prisoners laid it down for other people in Pelican Bay who were being submitted to cruel, unusual, and torturous conditions in the solitary confinement slave camps and gulags of California. This actually motivated me to be more assertive and aggressive and passionate in my organizing work in the state of Texas with comrades who were in the Texas area. I'm not going to mention their exact location, but Free World Comrades helped me copy flyers, information, and give that I could disseminate amongst the population, not just at the prison I was in. I disseminated information in just about every prison in Texas. There's 109 prisons, and just about every prisoner, if you go and ask them, do you all know who Comrade Malik is? They'll be like, oh yeah, that's the guy that be organizing the work strikes. And we made interesting flyers, we got the information out, and we had some people to actually get on board and participate in some actions. In April 4th of 2016, we had about approximately 8 prisons lay it down, refuse to go to work. We had 2 women's prisons. We were like, the women, at one place, I think it was the Crane unit, 40 women, they just laid it down. They said, we're not going in there. We're not working today. And that's all that we are asking. We're not asking people to strike out with violence. I've never advocated violence because that sabotages the success of your movement. When you advocate for violence, when you participate in violent actions against these state officials, you are sabotaging and cutting the legs off of your movement. What you do is you stay in your cell. When they come to your cell and say, do you want to work today? You tell them, we're not working. You lay back on your bunk, read a book, pray, listen to the radio, just don't go to work. And that was my stance. However, the state of Texas is very, very adept at engaging in what I call new wave COINTELPRO tactics. They'll actually recruited other prisoners to advocate for violence and to actually give the appearance that this was something that I advocated for. And they would put them in my mix. They would slide them up under me like as agent provocateurs. And because of my background, I was able to see a lot of what they were doing. But there was just an over-the-top amount of abuse, retaliation, harassment, and repression simply because I advocated for peaceful, nonviolent work strikes. But I also continue to act as a journalist and an activist, writing numerous articles explaining about the injustices and just the everyday conditions inside Texas prisons.
And you mentioned you were a journalist. How did you kind of go about doing this while incarcerated, and how did you get your work distributed amongst the public?
Okay, that was an excellent question. A lot of times I'd have to write everything out freehand before I got a typewriter. And it took a long time before I got a typewriter because typewriters cost $225. And for a prisoner, $225 is a lot of money. So it took a number of years. I may actually still have calluses on my pinky from the amount of writing that I used to do. So I would write my articles out longhand, and I would send them out to my comrades and friends. I have a very dedicated and trustworthy and loyal support network, even to this day. And I would send my articles out, and they would transcribe them, and then I would send out as I developed myself as a more and I gained notoriety, I would actually create media distribution lists, and we got up to like 150 emails of different journalists, some progressive, some radical, some mainstream, but we would come up with these media distribution lists, and I would just not only publish my writings in the San Francisco BayView. And the only way I could publish my writings in the San Francisco BayView is because Mary Ratcliffe, the current editor, who's training me to be the editor, she has been a indispensable supporter of politicized prisoners and political prisoners in America. She is going to publish the writings of Mumia Abu-Jamal. She's going to publish the writings of Hashima Denham, or Abdul Olagbala Shakur, or David Gilbert. You know what I'm saying? She's going to give them an opportunity for their voices to be heard. This newspaper, the San Francisco BayView National Black Newspaper, is a newspaper that supports the people's right to exercise their First Amendment rights. A lot of times in America, especially right now, we are demonized and criminalized because we are simply following the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States says that we have a guaranteed right to free speech. And especially, we're not advocating violence. We are just telling the truth. And a lot of times people with money do not want to hear the truth, especially in the state of Texas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I know that those organizing in prisons face very unique obstacles. What are some of the obstacles you've faced when organizing? I know you mentioned a little bit about having other prisoners try to change your strikes from nonviolent to violent, but what other things have you had to deal with in terms of organizing in prison?
Well, I guess I have to. There's a lot of things that happened to me, a lot of horrible things that happened to me that I was the victim of a lot of abuse at the hands of Texas prison officials in collusion with state officials, all the way up to the governor's office. Yes, Greg Abbott. Yes, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Yes, Attorney General Ken Paxton have worked in collusion to egregiously and abusively hurt those who exercise their free speech rights as prisoners. But I will tell you exactly what happened to me because I can speak with knowledge about what happened to me. Allow me to share something with you. In 2015, I was housed at a prison in Navasota, Texas, known as the PAC unit. For 7 years, the PAC unit had contaminated and toxic water well. The contaminant that had contaminated the water well was arsenic. During that time in 2015, simultaneously as I discovered that there was arsenic in the water, there was a deadly extreme heat lawsuit being filed. The head plaintiff was a prisoner named Keith Cole, who happened to be a friend of mine. I started digging into the contaminated water, and I met an activist from the Prison Ecology Project, which is a subsidiary of the Human Rights Defense Center, which is the flagship organization of the Prison Legal News, which is edited by Paul Wright. You might have heard of the Prison Legal News. Paul Wright and Panagiotis, which is a co-founder, Panagiotis, Tsolkas. Panagiotis actually wrote an article in September of 2015 highlighting the contaminated arsenic water at the PAC unit in Navasota, Texas. And the reason why this was so important and had such impact is because this lawsuit that was challenging the deadly extreme heat had a connection with the water, because remember, there was no air condition. 75% of the prisons in Texas have no air conditioning. So we have seen a large number of human beings die of deadly heat in Texas, and it's still going on today. However, the number one heat mitigation measure that the state of Texas tells prisoners that they want them to practice is they want them to drink plenty of water. Well, how the hell, excuse my French, how in the hell can you drink plenty of water when the water is contaminated with 2.5 to 4 times the EPA listed amount of arsenic? Yes, it's true. You can go search it. The state of Texas was forcing prisoners to drink arsenic contaminated water and live in deadly extreme heat. And the problem, what was really egregious about this is that PAC unit is a unit that houses elderly and infirm prisoners, many of who have terminal illnesses and who have chronic conditions. This is the type of demographic that is at this unit. So I exposed the contaminated water of the arsenic, and at 1 o'clock in the morning on September 18th, just a few days after the Prison Legal News article was published by Panagiotis, I was told, Washington, pack your belongings. You're leaving, and you're not coming back. And PAC unit happens to be a minimum security unit. I had not encountered any disciplinary cases. I have not participated in any violent activity. All I did was writing articles and basically minding my own business. I was sent to the largest prison in Texas, which is the Coalfield unit in Tennessee Colony, Texas. I was placed on the roughest housing unit at the prison. Okay, we were packed in there like sardines. There was a large amount of active gang members. There was violence in the unit every day. There was no air conditioning. It's called the glass house. Coalfield unit is called the glass house because there's glass that covers the windows from the bottom of the floor to the top of the ceiling. It's nothing but glass, and the glass isn't even tinted. So what this is a red brick oven. People are dying there. In 2019, there were 19 deaths at the Coalfield unit. 1 year, 19 human beings died at the Coalfield unit in Tennessee Colony. Not 2011, 2019. So I was sent to this unit, and I arrived there in late September of 2015, and that's where the torture began. And I could talk on this topic on and on and on. As far as after the 2016 September 9th strike, on September 8th, right before the historic September 9th strike in 2016, the day before, a captain and a regular CO, correctional officer, came to my door. They asked me to step out. I was handcuffed. I was taken to the gang intelligence officer's office, where there were actually approximately 12 white officers, cowboy boots. They wear Confederate gray uniforms there, and they had me standing in front of them with not just my boxers on. I was handcuffed behind my back, and they asked me, "Why do you keep saying that we practice prison slavery down here, boy?" And I told them to their face, "Because you racist bastards continue to treat us like subhumans and slaves, and you continue to perpetuate the legacy of slavery in the state of Texas. And that's why I'm going to keep continuing to advocate for the human rights and civil rights of the prisoners housed in here until you let us all go." And I was placed in solitary confinement for speaking truth to power. And that was on September 8th, 2016, one day before the historic national prison work strikes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. How were you able to continue organizing when you were put in that unit? And were you able to at all?
Yes. I was only able to continue my work is because, like I said, I had some beautiful comrades that rallied behind me. And once again, I would be remiss if I did not mention their names. I had Professor Victor Wallace, who at the time was the managing editor of Socialism and Democracy Journal. Carol Seligman, one of the co-editors of Socialist Viewpoint. Mary Ratcliffe, the editor of San Francisco BayView national black newspaper. Michael Novick, the editor of Turning the Tide newsletter. Justin Atkins, a professor at a university in Pennsylvania. Wow. Julie Schneier, who is a comrade with Blue Ridge ABC in North Carolina. Nube Brown, my fiance, who is also the host of Prison Focus Radio on KPOO 89.5 FM, the baddest radio station in San Francisco. There was a number of comrades who rallied behind me. IWOC did not kick me to the curb. The Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee did not throw me away. My comrades have continued to support me and advocate for me while I was trapped in solitary confinement. The Anarchist ABC Federation, the ABC Federation, Twitch, my close friend Twitch in Austin, Texas, Central Texas ABC, Austin ABC, Zai. These are some of the people that helped me while I was down. Leslie, Mayazad of Fight Toxic Prisons, Richard of Fight Toxic Prisons. I mean, there's just a long list. Even you, Jasmine, even on the tail end of me getting out, just you allowing me or giving me the space to actually tell my truth and actually be able to educate people about what is going on within the prison industrial slave complex. This is what you're doing. Your work is helping to educate people so we can start having these conversations about abolition. I mean, about maybe a year ago or before George Floyd, we weren't even having these conversations. People kept talking about reform, but reform is not working. We don't want more comfortable prisons. It's not working.
Mm-hmm.
It's not working. So we have to start talking about abolishing prisons altogether. And that's a difficult conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That's difficult. I wish Max Parthas was actually, I wish we could just, there's going to be one day where we can just snap our fingers and Max will be able to just pop on the screen, because I know he's here watching today. And Max is someone who can articulate what abolition is going to look like a lot better than I can. You have to understand that there's those of us that have knowledge in certain areas, and Max is actually on the forefront of actually advocating for legislation that actually will make abolition a reality. He's engaged in this type of work right now. And me, I have a part to play. We all have a part to play. As I always say, a finger is easy to crush. It's easy to break. A finger is easy to break, but a fist is hard to crush. So we need to work on solidarity, mutual aid, and collective work. And it's one thing I want to say that is very important. I mentioned, as you might have listened, I listed some of my comrades, Professor Victor Wallace, Carol Seligman, Bonnie Weinstein, Michael Novick, Richard from Fight Toxic Prisons, Maya Zod, even you, Jasmine. This is not something to just relegate it to Black people. This is not something to where just the white people are doing it. There are all aware and awakened human beings of different races, different genders. I have some incredible comrades from the LGBTQ community that are supportive of me. Alexis Terrajas of El Tecolote. El Teco has been incredibly supportive of me, the work that Nube is doing, the work that Mary Ratcliffe does. We have comrades from all different walks of life who are finally seeing that prisons are obsolete. Mm-hmm. They're causing more harm than good. And we have to start having a serious conversation about abolition. And we have to start answering the difficult questions about what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. I have another question for you kind of following up regarding that. And it's just, what eventually led you to start believing in prison abolition? At what turning point was there that you realized it was necessary to abolish prisons? And I know that you said you aren't the best person to articulate it, but with what you have now, how would you see a, prisonless future?
Okay, you said the prison of the future?
No. Future without prisons.
Okay, good. Okay, because prison abolition means no more prisons. Okay, we're not advocating for nicer, more comfortable prisons. We don't want prisons. And I think I came to the realization, I started embracing abolition more because I can tell you it was a process. I didn't just wake up one day and say, "Hey, I believe in abolishing prisons." No, because I looked around me and I said, maybe some of these guys deserve to be here. I was thinking that. So I said, but this is how I started to actually embrace abolition is in 2011, there was an elderly prisoner named Benny Trimble. And Benny lived right next to me. I was at the Darrington unit, which is in Rocheron, Texas. And Benny, he was right next to me. He had been incarcerated for approximately 31 years. So at 40 years, he was 71 at the time. He had been incarcerated for about 31 years, so he was 40 when he got incarcerated. He got into an altercation. He was a contractor. He was in the construction field. He got into a altercation with a white man. They got into a fight. He killed him. They gave him a bunch of time. They buried him. Well, Benny was starting to lose a lot of weight, and I was like, I started getting concerned. I have a background in the medical field. Benny wasn't really articulate as far as he wasn't a good writer and all that. One day, he looked at me and he said, Malik, he said, can you write my daughter for me? He said, man, the doctor keeps saying that I have arthritis, but something is wrong. He said, I'm having a lot of pain in my pelvic region. I'm losing a lot of weight. I'm having trouble walking. He said, man, this is more than arthritis. And I noticed he was starting to lose a lot of weight. And I said, you know what? Yeah, something might be wrong. Let me write your daughter for you. So I wrote his daughter. Her name was Reethy Trimble. And I wrote his daughter. And I told her that the doctor who had been treating Benny, his name was Dr. Edgar Halupez, that he was guilty of negligence and deliberate indifference to the medical needs of her father. And I wrote a letter to the Texas Medical Examiner's Office, and I wrote a complaint about Dr. Halupez. Well, a few days later, the gang intelligence officer, I wasn't involved in gang activity. I've never been a gang member. I'm just being straight up. I only have one tattoo, and that's the initials of my father, who passed away in 1988. That's all I have right here. I don't have any tattoos. I'm not a gang member. I've never been a gang member. Okay, I've lived with gang members. I've loved and actually ate with gang members. You know what I mean? I consider some gang members are my brothers and comrades, but I'm not a gang member. So anyway, the gang intelligence officer came and they locked me up. Then I said, "What is this about?" And they really didn't have a good answer for me. So I was well known at the prison that I was at, and some brothers came by and said, "Brother Malik, they shipped Mr. Trimble. He gone." I was like, "Where'd he go?" And they said, "I think he went to the Estelle unit." And Estelle unit is a medical unit, okay? And the Estelle unit actually treats a lot of people that have cancer. So I was like, I wonder what's going on. So anyway, a few weeks went by, and I was in the shower area, and an old man who had one of those portals up on his chest, he was on chemo, and he came up to me. He said, "Hey, are you Brother Malik?" I said, "Yeah, I'm Brother Malik. What's up?" He said, "Mr. Trimble," he said, "can you write his daughter again? He just got diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer, and he dying. He want to know, can you reach out to his daughter again?" I said, "What? He's got stage 4 stomach cancer?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Man," I said, "I don't even have his daughter's address anymore because I don't keep people's personal information. Like if you ask me to write your mom or your dad, I'll write them and then I'll get rid of it because of just impropriety. I don't want there to be any appearance. When you're a servant of the people, you don't want to have any appearances of impropriety or do anything that could be construed as you as taking advantage of the people. I mean, that's a revolutionary mindset because I'm a revolutionary. I believe in serving the people, not taking advantage of the people. You feel me? So I hadn't kept his sister's contact information. Well, a few weeks later, there was a correctional officer. She gave me the obituary in the newspaper, and Mr. Trimble had died in September of 2011. So that was one of the things that I came to my realization that these prisons are not rehabilitating human beings; they're hurting people. And what I didn't tell you about this situation was while we were writing the medical examiners, and while I wrote this letter to Reefy Trimble, Mr. Trimble's daughter, I also was in contact with the chairman of the Senate Criminal Justice Committee in Texas, and his name was Senator John Whitmire. So I wrote Senator John Whitmire a very detailed letter about the medical neglect and the deliberate indifference of Dr. Edgar Halupez at Darrington Unit in Rocheron, Texas. And John Whitmire is a fake. He is a violator of the public's trust. He's a Democrat. It doesn't mean anything. Everyone thinks Democrat, Republican, that these things mean something. They don't mean anything because both parties serve capital. That's what we have to come to the realization. They don't have a vested interest in the people. We have a problem in the United States, and I don't know that it can be solved on November 3rd by Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. We just hope that we can nudge them in the direction to make decisions that consider the people over money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how did you come to be involved in political organizing? Do you do work in terms of political organizing at all?
Absolutely. I do work political organizing. I would say that I've progressed. My political outlook and my political philosophy has progressed. I kind of consider myself an anarcho-socialist right now. I'm very embrace something called eco-socialism, which was basically taught to me by one of my mentors, Professor Victor Wallace, who wrote a very good book about eco-socialism and technology that I suggest that you Google and read. But Google Professor Victor Wallace, Wallis, PhD. He's read a very good book on eco-socialism. And he also wrote another book called Democracy Denied. These are books that kind of lay out some of my political philosophy and I'll describe it. But I just believe right now that we're not in climate change. We are in a climate crisis. So that we definitely have to figure in or factor the environment in with all decisions that we make. When we choose a candidate, we have to choose a candidate that is committed to the environment. So as far as political organizing, I am a member of the campaign to fight toxic prisons. So environmentalism is a huge part of my makeup. My fiance, Nube Brown, she loves nature. We love trees. We love to hug trees. We like to breathe fresh air. We love the water. We advocate for the protection of the environment. The San Francisco BayView National Black newspaper believes in environmental justice and exposing environmental injustice, which seems to plague poor neighborhoods, especially in San Francisco. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that toxic dump called Hunters Point Shipyard, which continues to toxify the bodies of the people who live in the Bayview Hunters Point area with radionuclides and other contaminants. So yes, I am engaged in political organizing right now. Just the fact that I write for the San Francisco BayView National Black newspaper is a testimony to my political activity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. What keeps you so empowered to do the work you do, and how do you continue moving forward given all the barriers and obstacles that you may face?
Basically, I think about the world-leading population of prisoners who are trapped inside American prisons. The United States of America continues to tell the world that it is a bastion of human and civil rights, and they continue to flaunt their exceptionalism on the world stage. And I know in my hearts of hearts that this is hypocrisy and lies, because I've actually lived inside these slave camps and gulags, and I've seen what really goes on. And so there's no way that I Keith Malik Washington will turn my back on the prisoners that I've left behind. We have to advocate for the freedom and also for the abolition of prisons in the United States of America. When we say defund the police, we are not advocating for violence and for criminals to come into our neighborhoods and steal and rape and hurt people. That's not what we're saying. We're saying take some of these billions of dollars that are being utilized to over police and over incarcerate human beings and put the money into the community where we can have community centers and mental health programs that will help the people and steer our children away from a life of crime. Poverty actually is the main source of criminal activity. If you watch the movie John Q, Denzel Washington played that part amazingly. He was not a criminal. He was a very hard worker. But his son had a congenital heart problem. When he went to the doctor to try to get help for his son, he was told that his insurance had expired.
Mm-hmm.
We have to start placing people before profits in America.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. How do you feel that intersectionality and community building has played a part in your work? I know you talked a lot about mutual aid and talking to these various communities. Could you expand a little bit more on the importance of intersectionality in the work that we do?
Yes, of course. You cannot have just a one monolithic organization and think that that is going to solve the difficult problems that we have ahead of us. Abolishing prisons is just one of the complex issues that we have to face here in the United States of America. We also have, like I said, we have an environmental problem where large imperialistic multinational corporations dump toxic waste into the soil. They spew it into the air. By fracking, we start to damage the water that we drink. We have to reach across the board and unify with different organizations so that we can work to attack a lot of these complex problems. As I said again, I will have to say this again. Recently, I've entered into a collaboration, into a pact of mutual aid and solidarity with the editor of El Chocolate, Alexis Terrajas. And he and I are currently in the process of organizing a fundraiser for the San Francisco BayView National Black newspaper. And the point I'm making is Latinx people, poor Asian people, Arabs, Native, indigenous people, we all have something in common. Look at the COVID pandemic and look how it has impacted our communities. We hear about Black and Latinx people suffering horribly because of this pandemic, and yet we don't talk enough about the indigenous populations who have been devastated on some of these reservations throughout the United States as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have an administration in Washington, D.C., which shuns science and has the audacity and stupidity to think that herd immunity is something that can be initiated here in the United States. But what about the lives? So there is a lot of intersectionality. There's a lot of collaboration going with different organizations, different races, different people from different, even political perspectives. We have anarchists working with progressives. You know what I'm saying? We have atheists, we have Muslims, we have Buddhists, Christians, transgender people, huge supporters of the work that I've done. And I'm a huge supporter of them. And I say that boldly. I support our sisters who are transgender, who have been murdered with impunity in the city of Dallas. They're human beings and their lives matter. I said that and I meant that.
Thank you so much. I know this is trailing a little bit back to earlier in the interview, but I know you mentioned the national prison labor strike. Would you be willing to elaborate more on that for folks who might not be familiar with it alongside your role in it?
Yes, we've had a couple of national prison work strikes. We've had the 2016 and 2018 action, and I played um, a role. I'm not, this prison abolitionist guru. It's like it takes a large collective work and a collective collaboration of comrades in every state. You have politicized prisoners in every state, and we all know who each other are. I mean, just like I didn't shout out Bennu Hannibal Ray's son or Kinetic Justice just because. I mean, I'm not going to shout out Joseph Shine White Stewart in North Carolina or Hashima Denham or Abdul Olagbala Shakur in California because it just sounds okay. These brothers are instrumental in the organizing of their fellow prisoners within their specific states. Okay, I just happen to be in Texas, which has the largest prison system in the United States. I mean, and the reason a lot of like, I'm gonna have to tell you this: a lot of people, men and women in Texas, don't want to do this type of work because it comes with so much abuse and human rights violations and repression. It's hard on the people that actually do this organizing. You do it at the peril of your own life. These people, and I'm talking about the prison officials in California and the prison officials in Texas, will set you up to be killed in order to silence your voice because they do not want your fellow prisoners being awakened to the abuse and the injustice. Okay, so prison organizing, prison work strikes. We got to get the word out. We make flyers, we write articles, we try to raise the awareness. Okay, and you have to deal with the mailroom because the state doesn't want prisoners not going to work. So they'll block a publication saying that it threatens the safety and security of the institution, and they'll bar it. I mean, that's how they bar. So sometimes you have to think of more creative and innovative ways to get information into prisoners. You're constantly, just tweaking your strategies on getting information in because it's the dissemination. The Bible there's a quote in the Bible. It says, "Our people perish for lack of knowledge." A lot of times, people were drinking that arsenic tainted water down there in PAC unit in Navasota, Texas for years, but they didn't know it was contaminated. And the people that have loved ones, there are people that have loved ones that are at that prison. And if they knew that the state of Texas was forcing their loved ones to drink arsenic tainted water, they would have showed up probably with guns and all kinds of stuff saying, give our loved ones some clean and safe drinking water or get them the hell up out of it. So a big part of prison organizing, when you're organizing prison strikes, is educating, the education. And I was one of the people that were instrumental in organizing and
Mm-hmm.
educating.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And how were you, originally educated as to these issues? I know you touched on it briefly, but if you could elaborate a little more in depth, is there anyone you feel like specifically helped educate you that you would like to elaborate more on that we didn't prior?
Absolutely. Once again, I would be remiss if I did not mention the name of Kevin Rashid Johnson. Kevin Rashid Johnson is the Minister of Defense for the new African Black Panther Party. He is a gifted theoretician. His understanding of Marxism, Maoism, Leninism is, pardon none. I mean, he's probably the closest thing that we have to George Jackson here in America right now. And um, I trust him. I respect him. He's a gifted artist, revolutionary artist. So it's not just his essays and his articulation of uh, political essays. It's also he's able to create these revolutionary works of art that actually reflect the nature of the movement. And he reaches back and puts things that are uh, in a nostalgic expression. Like, he might draw a picture of a brother that's being hung, being lynched, of something that happened maybe 60 years ago, and then he'll bring and have Uncle Sam with a big stack of $100 bills and then a picture of Trump up in there. I mean, it's just the brother just puts a collage, and just it's just a feast for your eyes and your mental to see the just amazing talent of this brother, who is not just able to articulate through his words, okay, through political theory, but also to be able to show you in art and reflect the struggle for freedom and justice in America. So I was basically, he was very influential in my work. And I mimicked a lot of what he did to become the person I am today. I just followed his lead. And that's probably a good reason why I'm here today, is because of him, Kevin Rashid Johnson, who's currently housed at Wabash Valley Facility in Carlisle, Indiana.
Thank you. And my final question for you as we start to wrap up is just, what do you think that the general public should know about prison abolition and formerly incarcerated or currently incarcerated people? And what would you like folks to just know about your experience, just very broadly?
Okay. Right now, the most important thing to me and to also my fiance, her and I are both on the same page on this. And I'm not saying this because she's actually launched a new social media campaign to free elders in American prisons. It's like, if we're going to start releasing people, I believe that we can convince the American public to get behind releasing our elders who have been incarcerated for 40 and 50 years. And I got to speak about California. California has a horrible reputation of caging our elders for decades and decades, and they do not pose a threat to society anymore. They've aged out of crime. My significant other, my comrade and friend and partner, Nube Brown, has launched a new social media campaign via Liberate the Cage Voices under the auspices of California Prison Focus. She and some of her comrades, Marisa and a couple other people, I don't want to mention their names, maybe Minister King, Kim Pollock, but they're advocating for the release of these elders, okay? And so that is something that is important right now on the forefront of our work. Release the elders. Release David Gilbert in New York. Release David Gilbert in New York. And if you don't know who David Gilbert is, look him up. He actually is the father of the head district attorney of San Francisco, Chesa Boudin. So Chesa and I have not spoken at all since I've been out. I've been at a press conference, but he doesn't call me and I don't call him. I consider Chesa an ally. Maybe one day we'll be friends, but I was a friend of his father before I even met him. So David Gilbert, the man is in his 70s. Let David go. Let Leonard Peltier go. Let these elders go. It doesn't make sense. Why are we using our tax dollars to incarcerate elder, infirm, and terminally ill human beings? So we're a bastion for human and civil rights, America? That's what we are? So with that, I'm going to encourage you to Thursday, KPOO 89.5 FM. Tune in to Prison Focus Radio, hosted by Nube Brown on Thursday at 11 a.m., 89.5 FM KPOO, the baddest radio station in San Francisco.
Thank you so much. We were so glad to have you speak with the organization. Your work is super admirable and inspiring, and I loved having this conversation with you. A little last note is just that if you're watching, check out Defending Rights in Dissent, rightsindissent.org. The latest episode from our Still Spying podcast series has been released, entitled The FBI's Inside Man in the Klan, which is actually featuring an interview with author and historian Mary Stanton. You can download it at stillspying.org or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And that is all from us today. So once again, thank you so much, Malik, for joining us and sharing your story and your experiences. Wish you the best of the luck with the work that you do. And thank you to everyone for tuning in.